Lewis Hamilton has become a 5-time Formula One world champion, clinching it in not great circumstances in Mexico, but when we look back in the record books, you never remember how someone won a championship. The simple fact is, he is now in that elite 3-man group of 5 times or more world champions. Nico Rosberg, his old nemesis, after the race posted a video of congratulations to Lewis, and in it he said that Lewis can now realistically target Michael Schumacher's records of 91 race wins and 7 world championships. Now Lewis is 20 race wins behind and 2 world championships adrift. I've got Stuart Codling and Ben Anderson here to discuss Rosberg's claims and whether we think there's any chance that Lewis can do it. Now, Lewis understandably didn't want to talk about this in the aftermath of winning the championship. He hadn't come to terms with equaling Juan Manuel Fangio yet, so to start talking about Schumacher was a bit much. But it's not too much for us, so we'll crack on with it. Ben, 91 wins, 7 championships, Lewis Hamilton, is it now a realistic possibility?
I think so, yes. It seems ridiculous to think of that, really. The records that Schumacher set at the time, I guess this always happens. In the period you think, okay, someone smashes records out of the park like that, you think no one's ever going to get close to that. And we didn't think Lewis would either, but the way the Ferrari challenge has unravelled, the way Mercedes has maintained its dominance through the V6 hybrid era, suddenly, with each passing season, you think, he could do this. I mean, he's won 9 races this year with 2 to go in wrapping up his 5th. It's realistic that if Mercedes maintain the same level of competitiveness relative to their opposition, that he could win 10 races in each of the next 2 seasons. So that's 1 record equalled. And unless Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari can come back much stronger than they've been this year through the course of the next 2 seasons, he could realistically be a 7-time world champion by the end of the current rules cycle.
We can reasonably assume that the competitive order is going to be fairly static over the next couple of seasons at least, because there's no sign of the second order teams really making that leap. All we can hope for is that maybe Honda finds something and that elevates Red Bull, and that Ferrari...
It's not going to be a short-term thing though, I would imagine.
And Ferrari just needs to avoid a drastic second half capitulation, as well as coming into the season with a competitive car, which we've seen them do one of those things, not yet do the other. So we can assume some sort of continuance over the next couple of seasons.
And no realistic threat internally either. So going back to obviously Rosberg, I mean, he was the man who denied Hamilton the 2016 World Championship, but
and a fair few race victories over that time.
Absolutely,
as well.
Yes. Whereas Valtteri Bottas, as good as he is, doesn't look yet that he's going to get to the level where he can threaten Lewis within that team. So it's going to come from Ferrari, or it's not going to come at all, is it?
Yeah. You never saw Rubens Barrichello or Eddie Irvine doing that to Michael Schumacher, did you? They knew their place, and if they dared step out of their place, it was
slap back down.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This is one of the comparisons, isn't it? When Hamilton had Rosberg as a teammate, he had a much tougher teammate than Schumacher ever faced during his years of dominance. But if Lewis is to break the record, he's going to surpass the number of starts Schumacher had in his first career. And we're only really looking at Schumacher's first career here because he didn't add to any of those records other than race starts when he came back with Mercedes. If Lewis breaks the records, which you've established is possible and is potentially realistic now, is the fact that he would do it over a course of more races, does that lessen the achievement compared to Schumacher?
I don't think so. I mean, these things, they go cyclically based on your circumstances, don't they? Arguably, Lewis had a much stronger start than anyone because he was almost champion in his rookie season. He was champion in his second season. It took Schumacher a few years before Benetton were ready to win a world championship. And then you could say, well, the middle period, if you like, is roughly equal. Lewis was at McLaren when they were going through a decline, and eventually he jumped that ship, and now onto the extraordinary success he's enjoyed with Mercedes. Schumacher took a few years again to build up with Ferrari. Could have maybe won the 99 World Championship if he hadn't broken his leg at Silverstone, and then from 2000 onwards was supremely dominant until Fernando Alonso and Renault came along and knocked him off his perch. So I'd see their careers as fairly similar, even if the starts were quite different.
It's very difficult to compare like with like in those circumstances, isn't it? Because people forget how dominant the Schumacher-Ferrari Bridgestone combination was. You had a very, very good car. Some people will say that it wasn't always legal. We can't prove that. But what they did have,
some people
was,
might say that about the Mercedes this year.
oh, indeed, yeah, with their
controversy.
wheel rims, yeah.
Part of the game, isn't it?
It is.
I can hear the phone ringing already.
Exactly. Hello, lawyers. No win, no fee. They also had tyres developed specifically for their car by Bridgestone, so they had a much tighter relationship with all the relevant partners than even Mercedes can have today, because Pirelli are equally servicing everyone. So,
and you had Schumacher pounding around Fiorano,
Yeah.
didn't you, endlessly, almost every day of the week, refining all of those concepts, which is something Lewis can't do.
Yeah, so Michael had a lot of stuff in his favour, apart from being a damn quick driver and at the top of his game. He had quite a lot more in his favour than Lewis has at the moment.
But I think what unites them is that making the most of every circumstance and detail at your disposal that you can. And Schumacher kind of blazed a trail for that, leaving no stone unturned, doing everything possible to be excellent in all areas. And it seems like Lewis has taken that on in the last few seasons, learned from the defeats he's had at the hands of Rosberg, and he's come back a stronger driver in the last 2 years. I mean, he says it himself, he's been driving better than he probably ever has. And now he's finally reaping the rewards and achieving the kind of statistics that maybe people thought he might do when he first started out in Formula One and was so brilliant.
Yeah, if anything, one of the things that we can agree both Schumacher and Hamilton have in their locker is their ability to win races that they probably shouldn't. And Lewis has mastered that, I think, since the threat from Vettel and Ferrari has increased over the last couple of years. Now, the time frame we've been talking about here in this discussion is always 2 years. And part of the reason for that is we have a big F1 rules shake-up in 2021, but also Lewis at the moment only has a contract to the end of 2020. Now, Rosberg says that it's doable in 2 years and that he thinks that'll be a big motivation for Lewis. If he doesn't quite break the records in that time, Codders, but he's close, could you see him signing another contract extension with Mercedes just to try and break the records, or do you think he doesn't care about them enough?
I find it very difficult to comment on that, because sometimes he gives the impression of not really caring about records, and yet once he's broken one, all of a sudden it's like he switches on to what he's achieved, and then he sees the next one and thinks, well, I've done this, I can maybe do that as well. Very, very often he seems to be a man who really just wants to win races and enjoy winning races, and he lives to do that. He has this Villeneuve-esque rage to win. But when he
Which Villeneuve?
Oh, yeah, not Jacques. I wasn't even thinking of him.
Sorry, Glenn.
Because he did make very heavy weather of the 1997 World Championship.
As I said in the intro, it doesn't matter how you win it, it's whose name's on the trophy.
Yeah. You say that, but people dredge it up when it suits them. For instance, we're 60 years on from Mike Hawthorne's championship win, and people can't resist picking over the fact that he didn't exactly win many races in that season. But anyway, when we weigh up where Lewis Hamilton stands in the pantheon of racing drivers, it's tricky to see where he sees himself. I think he would like to go out as the greatest of all time. So
who wouldn't?
Who wouldn't? So why not? I think he will shoot for it over the next 2 years, and that'll give him motivation to get even better over the next couple of years. And when you think of what he's achieved this year in a car that hasn't always been the best, I'd be very worried if I were anyone else on that grid right now.
Ben, Lewis said at the weekend that he admitted that he's quite careful not to let his emotions show too much in public. Do you think that's part of the reason for what Codder's mentioned there, that it's very hard to read how much he cares about these things?
Yeah, he's always seemed a bit guarded in public in the late years. I think he's learned from his early period at McLaren, where maybe he spoke a bit too openly about certain things, or maybe didn't always think through what he was saying before he said it, and things got blown up and taken out of proportion. But these things have to matter. I mean, the drivers, they know the history. Hamilton has been mentioning Fangio more and more as it's got close to the point where he could equal him. But I do think he's one of these drivers that goes season by season. I think, he's an emotional guy, and if the feeling is with him and he's happy in his environment, he's got the freedom he needs, he feels that he can develop himself and go to a new level in terms of driving and his approach, then he'll stay motivated and he'll keep going. And you could imagine that if next season goes well and he sees off the challenge from Vettel and Ferrari again, and that's championship number 6, he'll think, right, okay, now I'm going to go for number 7, I'm going to go for Schumacher's tally. And then if he manages championship number 7 and he thinks, well, okay, I could actually get 8 or maybe 9, if the team is still together and still looks like it has the same kind of competitive picture, I'll go for it, and then I will become statistically the greatest of all time. I think Lewis already believes he's the best driver on the grid, and perhaps one of the best of all time. But I think you can never really be sure, what he's thinking or how he feels in a bigger picture more than year to year, because things change. He might get to next winter and feel, actually, maybe next season doesn't go very well, and he feels like he can't progress anymore, and he just thinks, I'm done with this, and I'm going to bow out early. You just never know with these kind of things.
Like Ben says, Lewis was always someone who very, very emotional character, wore his heart on his sleeve. But then after years of having everything he said parroted, repeated, dredged up, analysed in the tabloids, he just, I think, just got fed up with the defocusing effect that has. And he says he doesn't care and it's a waste of energy. But I think he must have felt the sort of sapping of his energy of just having these people dogging his footsteps at all times, daring to preside over his choices, when clearly he feels that the choices he's made have empowered him to be stronger, whether it's doing fashion stuff, doing music production, which some people say is being a distraction, clearly isn't.
He doesn't feel so either, does he? He feels that it's more creative outlets that makes him feel more positive about life and everything he's doing. I think you used the word energy, and I think that's been really important for Lewis. He's not been shy about talking about changes he's made in terms of his diet and taking some of his training, his physical training, which is a very important part, obviously, of being a modern Formula 1 driver, on his own terms, working with different people, and he feels like he's got more energy than ever since he went onto a vegan diet. So all these kind of things will play a big role in defining whether he does go after those targets, because the Formula 1 schedule is getting more and more gruelling. They want to add more races. Obviously, testing's a big slog at the start of the year. If you don't have the energy within yourself, it's very hard to keep coming back year after year and operating at that high level. But I think Lewis is in probably the best shape he's ever been. So that tends to suggest that there's probably more chance that he will go for those numbers than won't.
Yeah, the days are gone when you could be out in Senna and just disappear off to the beach for winter and let Gerhard Berger develop the car for you.